Hello, friend. We are back. We are now going to discuss the 5818. So, from the last video, you understand that the 529, that formatting, this judgment that happens. The whole point of this whole channel is this strategic techniques, strategic solutions in order to move humanity into the future. Now you're going to see that it's quite an interesting movement that takes place. So here we have the channel of judgment. The channel of judgment is all about insatiability. So this channel of judgment is this insatiable need to make corrections, to make judgments, to absolutely correct whatever is wrong so that humanity can move into the future. So the 58th gate is mutative. It's in this mutative quarter, this mutative energy. And the 18, that is in this channel of bonding and duality. We need to have the other. It's a requirement for us to have the other so that we know what needs to be corrected, so that we can see what needs to be corrected. So again, the 5818, it begins in the root and it moves us up to the splenic center. So there's this collective sharing. This is all about understanding. This is about the future, and it is visual. You'll understand that once we get to the 17th gate. It's a projected channel. It needs to be recognized. It needs to be invited. This isn't about you throwing your subjective judgments around or even your objective judgments around. It has nothing to do with that. Has everything to do with being invited for your opinion. So it brings a judgment when something is dissatisfied with. It is insatiable, unlike the mirror of the 4130, right? The 4130 comes to a satiated place where it can be full. And then as it moves through the experience, it empties out as it goes along. But the 58, it's insatiable. There is no way to curb this appetite for correction. So inviting the opinion of what is wrong, busy figuring out the facts, and it wants to have these stable patterns to use for the movement into the future so they can test the validity of the pattern. And it must have a focus, this logic insatiability, to perfect patterns and have the energy to do so. So logic has to struggle and fight for energy. And I will introduce that to you so you can really grasp this, this whole thing that I probably went over it in the last video. So the whole thing that the 31st gate in the throat, the 16th gate in the throat, and the 62nd gate in the throat, that's all a part of this collective understanding circuitry. It's none of that is connected or pointed towards a motor. So there's always a struggle and a fight for energy. And what you'll notice as we move up this stream of taste, that you'll notice that what the important piece of this really is. So someone with this channel will take great joy in sharing with you just what you need to be a better human. So the collective sharing is not a two-way street. These people do not want to be told how can they be better. They want to tell you how you can be better, though. So this collective sharing, again, is not a two-way street. So these people will nitpick, yet bring a solution so the small things in a relationship do not destroy it. So, here's what I mean. So husband and wife, maybe, they use the same toothpaste. And that toothpaste, the husband's constantly just squeezing right out of the middle. And the wife likes to, she's got this channel. She likes to move all the toothpaste up right from the bottom, get every little last bit out of there. Well, those little tiny minute things can absolutely destroy a relationship, because it's like, the other one, they're wrong, they're doing this wrong, blah, 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 blah. But if this channel's really working in a healthy way, it will actually come up with a solution. Hey, there's those little tiny machines that you can put on the end of the toothpaste. You kind of twist them, and it twists up, and you bring all the toothpaste from the bottom. So it's not that the other person is wrong in how they do it. Logic is always striving for perfection. So they want that toothpaste to look perfect. They want to squeeze every last drop out of there. So this channel actually feeds into the next one, right? The 5818 feeds into the channel of talent, which is the 4816. That'll be the next video. So it is joyously correcting the patterns to get the talent to master the system. This is mastery. This is system mastery. This is perfection. So what is those insatiable corrections that have to be made in order to enthusiastically identify with that perfection? So avoid words like should, must, or better. Make any solution into an experiment. So, for an example, again, when we talk about the husband and wife, instead of saying, well, you should do this, or you must do this, or you could do this better, you provide the solution. If you have this channel, it's about providing the solution, and then experiment with it, right? Like, make it an experiment. So that if that experiment doesn't work, you tweak it. You tweak the theory. You tweak the experiment. That is what science does. And that's why this channel is insatiable. It's constantly tweaking. It's constantly, adjusting. It's constantly making things better. It's this collective science experiment. So the theme as we move from the root to the splenic center is caring. So on the solar plex side, it was all about sexuality. And the 59.6, this is our source of sexuality. And what you guys will learn about this when we get to the tribal circuitry. And you'll understand this deeply. But on the splenic side, this is all about caring. So there's a pressure to be aware. And it's not about this, pressure to be emotional and emote emotions like on the solar plex side. This is a pressure to be aware. Now, there's a difference here. So when I spoke in the videos about the centers, this nervous awareness is an emotional nervous awareness that needs to, ride up and down on the wave, that solar plex. However, but the spleen is in the now, spontaneous, right in this moment awareness. So there's a pressure here to bring out experimentation. The 58, that's the whole joy for it. Can we experiment? What are we experimenting with? It's about discerning what is correct to experiment with, what isn't correct to experiment with. That discernment comes through strategy and authority. Because what happens logically is, we want to correct everything. Well, no, there's going to be there's going to be particular patterns that it's up to you to correct and to help humanity move into the future. It's not about everything. It's about focusing in on, what needs to be corrected. Again, it's, busy figuring out those facts, and it wants stable movement so that the future, can be moved into this validity, this validity of the pattern so the future can happen. What is valid right now, what is not valid, and that must have a focus, and that focus comes from strategy and authority. So there's a potential of sheer pleasure in simply being alive. There's this vitality is the only thing that overcomes boredom. Most energetic of the fuels, of the 9 fuels, is this 58. It fuels the logical system to recognize patterns and perfect them over and over and over and over again. So why is it most energetic? Well, logic is starved for energy. So it is, got so much vitality here, so much energy to assist in that process. So the vitality is the necessary fuel to be able to challenge any pattern, standard, or stasis. Here, again, we're in the logic, right? What are we focusing in on? What are these patterns? What are these details? What kind of depth, what kind of skill do we need to move this into the future? And it's all collective. This has absolutely nothing to do with you personally. Very hard to take that in when you have a collective channel, as it is not about you personally. So this fuel, this stream of judgmentation, the ability to judge, discern, distinguish is its real great gift. The fuel to deal with the fear of authority by sharing vitality to challenge it. So the 18 is all about the fear of authority. We need to have this healthy fear and then challenge those authorities. Because it isn't about stasis. It isn't about the status quo over here. This is truly about tweaking. Vitally moving forward. And there is this, taste over here for the saltiness of life. And that's something, again, that you're going to understand when we get to the biology piece, is that the 5818 is this balance for salt. So it's about understanding that we all need salt. And the salt actually allows you to be able to trust that instinctive knowing that is within this channel. So the 58, this joyous, this vitality, this fuel for logical process, the pressure to get the experiment done, the energy to correct and to challenge, and the pattern driven to come up with a solution that will protect and to make the collective healthy. And this circuitry is never, ever personal. Collective caring is never personal and really is, so impersonal. And that, again, is hard for us to grasp. On this side of the body graph, on the splenic side of the body graph, this is about caring. And yet, it's very impersonal. Caring is actually very impersonal. And in a sense, I can recognize that. Like if the nurses and the doctors and every healthcare provider, if that's the languaging you want to use, we're totally attached to every outcome, I can imagine that they would be completely drained. Myself as a coach, I cannot take responsibility for how you are going to use the material and how you are going to or are not going to utilize it. Period. It's impersonal. So it is attempting to get the energy to get the experiment going, to see if it works or not. Where do we focus this vital fuel? So this is the gate of caring vitality. So the energy to care about everything. A design of speculation. It is speculating on the future. Again, logic has no guarantee on the future. It will speculate about it. It will create models. It will create theories. It will do all of that. Because what it has to do, fundamentally, because logic is starved of energy, yes, it has this 58th gate here that's coming out of the root. That's more of a fuel versus an energy. And because of that, it really has to talk the talk. Logic has to talk the talk to try to, swoon in those investors. Because it needs the energy. So it speculates, creates models, creates theories, gets all enthusiastic about, oh, this and that and this and that. And then if the funding is there, then it can go forward and experiment. So this is actually one of the gates of mundane love. So it's important to have a personal connection here with other people. We need to have other people so that we can perfect love. It's about improving love. There's a power to challenge the status quo, seeing that refinement is possible. Highly specialized energy available for logical experimentation to ensure the safe future for humanity. The unique energy here permits repetitive experimentation, and without this energy, we would not test the formulas. Again, this, out of all 9 of the gates and traits out of the root center, this is the one that has the most energy because it is, trying to do its best to push right up to the throat. But if we didn't have this vitality and this joyousness, we would never test the formulas. So without this energy, we would never know for sure that a pattern is legitimate and what value it brings to the totality. The first line is all about this love of life, which we're going to get into in the next slide. It indicates real love is the recognition of a pattern that provides security for the totality. Remember, this energy is not aware yet. It is just a fuel. We are in the root center. Awareness doesn't happen till we get to the spleen. So it's providing this fuel. And it hopes that the 18th gate will bring the awareness, what needs to be challenged, what pattern needs to be challenged. So the gate of, caring vitality, this gate does care. It's the 58.1, the love of life. Does not want the world around it, to go to pot, to go to destruction, doesn't want that. So the perfecting of love, this is a love that is being corrected all the time. So I love this because here we're going to get into some interesting dynamics as we walk through this. So stimulation is the key to joy. Now, there's this this stimulation as to what pattern needs this fuel? What do we need to focus in on? And then it will bring the joy to that 15th gate through that stimulation of that pattern. So here we have the right angle cross of service. Your assessment of what needs to be improved is how you serve the collective. And then the juxtaposition of vitality, there's, situations of vitality uplift and nourish you. And those you are a bridge for. And then the left angle cross of demands this exercise, exercise great patience as you bring correction to the collective. So of course, demands, right? We hear that word and it's like, I want it now. And the splenic center is, it's pointing towards the spleen, and the spleen is spontaneous. And these demands actually need patience because it needs to know, what does it need to focus in on? So let's start at the very beginning. This love of life, the very stimulation of the world, is the basis of an aesthetic appreciation of its beauty and wonder. Alone or shared with others, this profound inner realization is the key for a joyous harmony with the process of being, the energy which fuels the love of life. When we're in the root center, and this is something you're going to learn as we move into the abundance factor and the abundance of the design, is that there's freedom in the root center. And freedom is not an outside circumstance. Freedom is an inside circumstance. So this love of life, this fuel for the love of life, this fuel to, care deeply for the vitality of humanity. This brings a great freedom to those with this particular channel or gate. Or, on the flip side, freedom is always, a constraint on the other side. So there's either freedom or constraint. And you get to decide as you move through with your particular design. So the moon has its phases, its moods that will limit joy to an intermittent and cyclical experience. Now, isn't that interesting? We're back to cycles all of a sudden. And that actually is, cycles are for the abstract world. But a cyclical energy which intermittently fuels the love of life. So even though cycles are a part of the abstract, there's going to be cycles here as well. Because once the mastery happens, then that being no longer needs to practice the technique. It just becomes ingrained in their cellular structure. So that cycle comes to a close, and then, maybe they practice for 15 years on the piano, and then the next thing they want to do is the drums. So again, I want you to watch how the DNA coaxial, movement happens here. And then perversion. This is one that is, Ra always kind of joked about this, because perversion, immediately we go to this sexual perversion. So a genius for perverse stimulation that afflicts oneself and others by promoting degeneracy and reducing joy to indulgence and decadence. The energy which fuels the drive for perverse stimulation. So, of course, we always have a prejudice when it comes to languaging, right? This prejudice, of course, is that we are speaking, about sexual perversion here, this sleazy connotation. But what second lines, of course, are all about is this projection outwards. So what it is projecting outwards is, I have the energy to enjoy giving this energy to any challenge of authority and any logical experiment. So what this energy is given, it can appear to be very perverse to a lot of people. So what this energy is given to, So, for example, right at this time in humanity, There's, a lot of speculation and talk about how Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, if you want to call it that, he has this perverse caring for humanity where, however you want to look at this, has created vaccines. And some people see his perversion for experimenting with human beings in Africa and India. And, so many of them have become even sicker, lost their lives, become paralyzed, all of that. There's a perversion here because, there's this caring, but the caring is very perverse because the experiment is on humans. So, is it up to us to decide what fuel, what energy should go towards what? Not really. It really is about the science, and then who can really talk the talk to then, get the funding. And as we walk up to the 16th gate, you guys are going to see this in a very, very profound way. We have been experimenting on living beings, on bunny rabbits, on rats, on mice, on human beings, on anything that is breathing and alive on this planet, as well as, viruses that don't breathe, that aren't alive, bacteria. We have been experimenting in all of this, and sometimes the perversion and the joy of doing something outside of the status quo, is a great stimulation for some. Then the electricity. So the individual whose electric vitality creates its own stimulation and is not dependent on others. The energy to fuel independent stimulation. So what I love here is that this is all about the material plane. This is something you guys will know when we get to the abundance piece. So this electricity to, use the fuel to move into this collective process. And it can be, quite independent here, right? It's not dependent of others. However, what's really interesting is that the logical side, as we move closer to the throat to manifestation, it's the freedom here and the ability to be electric is what is going to then, attract the resources. So 4 is about focusing, a natural, specialization that when confronted with a multiplicity of stimulations will have no inner difficulty in focusing on the appropriate influence. The energy to fuel recognition of which stimulation is of value. So we come back to this focusing. How is, the 58th gate externalizing its joy and vitality? Well, it has to focus. Because if a scientist came up to you, no different than someone in business, right? We see this on examples of Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, these business or these TV shows that entrepreneurs come up and sell their wares. As soon as the focus gets scattered, the sharks are right on that. They're like, you got to have a focus. You got to know where you're putting your money, blah, blah, blah. So externalizing vitality and joy literally says we need to have a focus. And then the unpressionability that becomes confused when confronted with the multiplicity of stimulations, and in trying to accommodate it all becomes very unstable. So the energy which becomes unstable when overstimulated. So if we're not focusing this vitality, then there's no electricity. We're not, this electric being. that can really sell our perversion. Because what I, have an understanding of caring, and what I may want to bring logically into the mix is not what you're going to. Because of this love of life, there's this, perversion could be promoting anything. And then there has to be this electricity and a focus. So again, watch as we move up each one of these and see how they play out in the world. If this is a part of your design, you get to then see how it plays out in your design. And if it isn't, the mechanics quite aren't tweaked, then it's to then look at, where is the not self pulling me off of my God code, of my self-mastery? So then we get to the 5, and the 5 is this defense. And the 5 is really all about, other people projecting onto this 5th line. So people are always projecting on that they have the energy to provide a stimulation, that they have the energy that can bring about the experimentation. And because of that, they are approached a lot. So there is this defense kind of that goes up here. So a natural and practical instinct to protect oneself regardless of temptations. The fuel for self-defense regardless of situations or stimulations. So defending its focus. Because there's going to be, 10 people that walk up to you and want your vital energy. They want this joyous, love of life and this electricity and this perversion. And yet you have one focus. So it's about defending that focus, regardless of how many stimulations come towards you. So the assumption that the best defense is a good offense, that might allow strength of character to enjoy questionable stimulus without succumbing to it. The energy for aliveness, which forsakes self-defense and will embrace questionable stimulation. Again, strategy and authority. What is your strategy? What is your auric field indicating to you? What is the correct place to focus your joy and vitality? Then you move forward and you can, stand in the defense of your focus. And then we get to the 6, and the 6, it's looking at the whole logical stream, and it's looking out at the horizon. And this 58th gate is looking towards the 38, and the 38 is a very interesting gate. So it's looking out, and it gets completely carried away as to what is the carrying vitality, what is the fuel that we can bring forward. So the tendency to practicality, that while thoroughly enjoying external stimulation, has the instinct to draw back when its independent integrity is threatened. So the energy to fuel independent integrity that will maintain its identity in times of stimulation. So we see this in the world, how all of a sudden logic can get completely carried away. But the truth here is that there's an energy to fuel independent integrity so that it can maintain the identity. Even in times, 10 or 15 people are, poking at you and want this joyous vitality. It's about maintaining that identity and being integral. So when its basic intelligence is effectively stimulated, its natural desire for attunement will lead it to identify so strongly with the stimulation that is at risk of losing its identity, the energy which fuels loss of identity in times of stimulation. So let's just for a moment take a look at this from a 30,000 foot view. And where I see this playing out always is when we have laboratories and scientists bought off, paid for, so that the narrative that wants to be pushed by whatever organization is brought to the forefront, and that particular scientist or the laboratory itself absolutely loses its identity. Because even though the science most likely will at some point contradict that narrative, they are paid off. There is no more integrity. And because of that loss of integrity, what is actually brought out into the collective as this vital caring is very far from it. But because logic is starved of resources, the narrative will continue to be nattered and chattered about. And we know that because the 62, the 16, and the 31 don't have resources to manifest. So they will find resources, they will find energy, and the identity of those doing the conversation and being the forefront can be completely lost. Okay, let's go to the 18. This is a part of my design, so I totally understand and see this play out. So the capacity to challenge authority and to recognize when correction is necessary. This is a lot of the whole challenge mom and dad. Challenge those that raised you. Because, we can do better. The next group of people can do it better. The next generation can do it better. So there's always this challenge of mother, father. And, challenging whatever pattern needs to be challenged to move us into the future. So again, here, remember we talked about salt. Salt is a great part of the logical stream. And we need the salt so that, all of our frequency that's, the electricity that's running through our body, as you saw in the 58, so that electricity can run through our body so it has a conduit to do that, so that we know what needs to be corrected. So our survival depends on our willingness to challenge any pattern. We challenge our parents and authorities to establish authority by challenging the authority and then winning. Patterns change because they break down and become obsolete, and this keeps the capacity for correction engaged. So the gate of instructive caring, the design of challenging, this is instructive caring. There is instructions happening here all the time in the 18. And again, I know this deeply. I give my husband instructions all the time, and he also has the 18th gate. So it's reciprocated back, and neither one of us really love it, because do you remember when we talked about the 18, the 58-18? The correction isn't a two-way street, but we both have this gate. So we're doing it to, we're instructing each other constantly throughout, close to 30 years now we've been together. So there's a design of challenging. We need the power of instructive care for the correctness of inner authority, so there is no madness in the realm of caring. So do you remember, the 58th gate, the integrity, can be lost there in the 6th line, 58.6. Well, this 18th gate says, hold on a minute. I don't want to lose the integrity. The awareness here is what is vital or what is not vital. Hold on a minute. Let's test this pattern. It's very critical. And this has the ability to break away from the patterns of the past in order to establish available patterns for the future. This will enjoy discovering, naming, and challenging what needs correcting. So you are the perfect person to have around when we are trying to see what is wrong and needs improvement. Your gift of critical awareness directs you to the source of a weakness and imperfection. When you experience dissatisfaction with something, chances are it has lost its vitality. You can focus your thinking on ways to correct, modify, and replace weaknesses and imperfections. And you may have a fear of authority and at the same time a desire to challenge authority. Be careful about being too critical personally by judging yourself or others, as this can lead to disappointment. I watched this in one of my classmates. She's no longer on the planet with us. And she has brought lots of, she spent years, 30 years with Ra. And, well, I guess, however long. Anyways, probably 20, 21 years. I shouldn't say 30. That's an exaggeration. But she created a plethora of PowerPoints and charts and explanations for everything in the human design system to break it down. She was one of my greatest teachers. She talked a lot, and sometimes it was difficult to listen to her. However, she knew this system inside and out. And she had this 18th gate. She actually had the 5818. And at the end of, her life, it totally broke my heart to know that her and her daughter had a falling out because she corrected something in her daughter's home and her daughter lost it and totally cut her out of her life. So it's a sad story and yet critical. I see how my not-self mind wants to push me to puke out critical judgment. And yet, when I'm correct, and my husband and I are having a conversation, and we're, talking about things that we're building on the farm and that kind of stuff, those corrections can then come out as a response to our conversation versus the not self mind, coming out and grabbing onto something, creating a lot of disappointment. So let's move on here to walking through this. So, correction is really about working on what has been spoiled. So the vigilance and determination to uphold and defend basic and fundamental rights. That's really what this is all about. The vigilance and determination to uphold and defend basic fundamental human rights. For me, our whole planet is, has been completely stripped of our own human rights. And it just, literally breaks my heart. But the only thing that I can do is be correct in my own frequency, be correct in my own decision making, and hold true to that so that I can then, create a ripple effect out there into the world for others to be correct, for others to, stand in their correctness and enhance their frequency. And then when we can do that, you guys, when you can be my legacy, I can be Ra's legacy, and we can literally stand in that frequency, we make the ripples to change what has been spoiled. So there's a right angle across the service. Your logical assessment of situations brings forth correction for the betterment of society. You are aware of any flaws that may disrupt the natural flow here and the juxtaposition of correction. And the left angle cross of upheaval, you can cause an upheaval to the patterns that may not fundamentally move humanity into a better future. So at its core, there's conservatism, the adherence to traditional patterns despite and or in spite changing circumstances. So the gradual modification to avoid eventual upheaval. The potential to correct through a gradual modification of judgments. The patriarch whose rigidity guarantees deterioration, the potential to refuse to correct. And this is what I say about being overcritical. We really want to be conservative. This conservatism to what is the circumstance we want to correct because it has been spoiled. So knowing the focus is really important, super important, so that we can be conservative as to what are we putting our energy towards. Because we can't put our energy towards everything. The logical side is starved of that. So we need to be able to know what we are going to put our energy towards. So the second line, this terminal disease. So something that is important to understand is that any second line, second tone, second color, what can happen in here, and you're going to learn this more when we get into the PHS and the biology piece of this, is that disease can actually sit for a very long time in the second gate and can sneak up and happen in a blink of an eye. And this can, also, this can also be a terminal disease as to nitpicking. So the recognition that what has been spoiled is irreversible. The acceptance and strength derived from faith is spiritual regeneration. The acceptance that there is no potential for correction. These are the incessant bitchers. There's always something hidden. Okay, terminal disease, there's always something hidden. There's always a deeper level that needs to be corrected and pulled out. So the futile raging against the wind, the refusal to accept that there is no potential for correction. Sometimes we can't correct it. Sometimes we can't. And then the zealot, the energetic obsession to clean house. I see this a lot in our world as well. And I see how this, the 18th gate, so the 5818 as a whole, but the 18th gate for sure, because it's constantly working on what's been spoiled. It does, literally enjoy cleaning house. But cleaning house as well here is about, the disillusion of old forms at an acceptable price, an obsession with correction and its critical potential. Rigid judgmentation that creates as many problems as it solves. An obsession with correction that does not bring satisfaction. So I have this, and actually one of the things that I truly, truly enjoy doing is I enjoy cleaning. Not that my house is definitely not the cleanest house in the world, but it gives me this sense of, it just gives me this sense of feel good when I can literally clean my house. But what else gives me a sense of feel good is when I see the degeneration of patterns be corrected so that humanity can move vitally into the future as well. So then the fourth line, this is actually the line that my 18th gate is in, both of my 18th gates. It's the incompetent. So here we are, we're working what's been spoiled, and yet the externalization of this is the incompetent. Difficulties as a result of inadequacies that cannot resolve because of inadequacies. We need to have the other. So the 18th gate in the quarter of bonding, we need to be able to have the other person. The 18th gate sits in the spleen. What do we know about the spleen? The spleen is, this is our immune system. It's our lymph. This is how we stay healthy. And yet, there's this incompetence, this inability to correct what is spoiled because we actually need to have the other person. So the inability to correct and its potential for suffering. There are things in my life that I know that I will never correct. I know that. And one of the things is like completely keeping organized with all of my material and all of that. I have probably, I can't even tell you how many manuals I'm pulling information out of for this course. And they're everywhere. They are like, it's insane. And does it create me a little bit of suffering? Yeah. Because I spend a lot of time like reading and rereading and looking at stuff and coming up, it's just who I am. However, when we get to variables, you guys will see as well, there's another layer in there that it is who I am, but I'm absolutely incompetent in changing any of that. And then we get to the fifth line, and the fifth line, this universalization that it's about therapy. So the strength to recognize a problem and to accept that it is beyond one's power to solve it alone. Again, this is a collective process. And it's important to understand that we cannot go this alone. We need bonding. We need the other. So the wisdom to both seek and provide guidance. The potential for correction and judgment through relationships. So we're coming from the incompetent. So I know what I totally cannot correct in my life. And then I need to be able to hire that out. Bring in a consultant, bring in that guidance, bring in that information, bring in whatever I need to help me work through what needs to be corrected, because I can't go it alone. And it will create suffering if I try to. So here, the mental patient, chronic instability and potential madness, where relationships cannot assist in correction, the potential of mental instability. So again, we have to bring in the other, but here it's like, where relationships cannot assist. And it might not be a relationship. It might be hiring somebody. It might be, that kind of interaction that needs to happen. And then we get to Buddhahood, the perfected form. The Buddhist state of the internal child and the energy to find new horizons, to avoid stasis, the potential of the perfected form through correction. The mundane application of the above, the ability to tap public opinion, take public opinion, tap public opinion, and share the methodology, the potential to share the values of the correction with others. And what the 48th or the 18th gate, which is really interesting, it's actually moving towards the 48. And this whole stream, you know, the 18 up to the 48 happens in the splenic center, and the 18 is looking for towards the 48. So I'm going to show you how that movement is so important. So this being able to have this corrected form, and look at how how quite negative this whole thing is. We have terminal disease, we have incompetent, we have therapy, and then out of all of that suffering, out of all of that, you know, potential struggle, we get the perfected form. And something else you're going to recognize is in the channel 3828, when we get there, when we get to the actual channel of struggle, like, we are not designed as human beings on this planet to just breeze through. We are designed to have a little bit of resistance so that we can see the this and the that, so that we can recognize, you know, when we are on track and when we are off track. And we can recognize that, you know, correction is not easy. We are talking about the collective here, you guys. And it's totally impersonal. So as we add these layers of information on here, then you're like, no wonder there's a mental patient here. Because our minds can't figure this out. We just have to allow for the body to navigate this. All right, on to the next video.